Poonam Kathuria, is your sense, therefore, that perhaps we saw it with Nirbhaya about 12 years ago here in Delhi? It suddenly woke up people to what could happen to someone in Delhi. In Kolkata, middle-class girl, therefore suddenly the middle-class anger spills out. Would it spill out when it happens in an Ambedkar Nagar? Would it spill out when it happens in rural Chhattisgarh or Jharkhand?
So, Rajdeep, I think the question is a little more complex than that. I think we have to move away from this whole notion of criminal justice system as the answer to the issue. I think we have to look at a governance response, which means, it changes in attitude, changes in norms, and we want safety. And I'm very clear, we don't need protection. We do not want sensitization. That's very patronizing. We want rights. Women want the right to, justice, right to safety, right to move freely. And I
but
think
does a woman in rural India have ma'am, the point is, does a woman in rural India have those same rights? At least does that woman in rural India have those rights?
So for that, we need to understand the logic of, like, the sense of injustice and what leads to a protest. And if you look at it's been, let's say, look at last 50 years. 1972, the Mathura rape case happened and the country rises up. Mm-hmm. And then you have 1992, the Bhavri case, and you have some protests. And 2012, the Nirbhaya. I think Mathura rape case, people were outraged because they felt, how could these service providers, these people who were supposed to be protectors, suddenly could do something like this? This was the first time that it came in. Bhavri Devi did not get so much traction, but she had the backing of a movement. Nirbhaya, of course, the country could relate to it. And it was, and I think, if you look at the anatomy of a protest, it is when people across caste, class, gender come together and protest. Somewhere everyone is feeling this could happen to me and it could happen to anybody close to me. And that is where I think the proximity to the national capital, middle class girl, educated, was a very important factor. The presence of media can make or break a news. So I think that was a very important element there. So I think we need to understand, and then of course you have this whole idea. Now, nothing of that exists in a rural area. You have caste, you have class. I think what happens also is that protests have a power equation and between the survivor, the protesters, and the protectors. Now, so who is the survivor? A survivor, do they have a family backing? Bhavri, for example, if she came from a Dalit background, how many Dalit women find justice? How many Dalit women's cases, migrant women's cases find traction? But because, again, this case, this girl again came from a middle-class family in Kolkata, was a professional, has a professional organizational backing, and also I think a certain amount of where it happens. Does it happen? The place where it happens. If it happens in Delhi, if it happens in the ruling government's state, it happens in another state. So I'm saying somewhere our society has to question itself on what does it respond to and what does it not respond to. We have had worse cases than this. And I think, ADR's report, I think we are aware of, where 358 MPs and MLAs have rape cases against it, and the political class has accepted them as their own.
That's an important point which I'll bring with to Priyanka Chaturvedi in a moment. But Trisha Shetty, just let's look at what was just said, that Kolkata, middle class, professional woman with dreams in her eyes, go a healer, a doctor in a government hospital. Is that the reason why this has struck a chord across India's cities? Much like Nirbhaya, again a young woman, aspirational young woman who's hoping with stars. Is that the reason why these cases get traction in a way that perhaps cases that might happen again outside the big city don't? And what does that say about us?
Undoubtedly. We live in a country of great paradoxes, right? We have President Draupadi Murmu, which was a great moment for India to reckon with its complicated history of caste-based politics. And in contrast, if you just look at statistics and numbers, in India, as of the last report that we have of the NCRB, we reported 4,45,256 cases of crimes against women. Out of this, 5 states make up for 50% of the cases. and I'm going by the order of the cases, right? That's Uttar Pradesh at the very top, followed by Maharashtra, followed by Rajasthan, followed by West Bengal, followed by Madhya Pradesh. Now, when you talk about crimes against Dalit women, 10 Dalit women every day are subject to rape according to NCRP data. I repeat, 10 Dalit women are subject to rape every single day. There's a really good report that was come out by Equality Now and Sabiman Society that studied Haryana. And they specifically speak about how the India justice system has failed survivors of caste-based sexual violence. And they've given specific anecdotes. Why? Because when they studied cases that specifically women who are Dalit women and girls go through, they are subject to 62.5% of gang rapes. Rajdeep, 62.5% of gang rapes in comparison to 11 to 12% of gang rapes that women from other communities and castes are subject to. So what we see is people who belong to the Dalit community, their bodies are subject to a lot more grotesque violence and crime. Why? Because the perpetrators from the highest caste believe that they can get away with it, right? If you go back to what the survivors, victims' brother in Hathras said, he said the verdict is according to our caste. That is a slap against all of our faces, right? That this is what the litmus test of Indian society is currently. Look at, going back to this report, 42% of rape cases, the police have dropped investigation and refused to file charges when it comes to handling cases of Dalit women who've been subject to rape, in comparison to the national average of, again, 15%, where the police have dropped charges. So time and again, what you see in India is impunity, protection of rapists from the highest of offices when they are committing crimes, as you rightfully pointed out, of women who belong to rural communities, of women who belong to Dalit communities, OBC backgrounds, tribal communities, religious minority communities, and also then the justice system failing them. And the only time we talk about it is when there's public outrage. We must just quickly, I'm just want to say, I'm really heartened by what Priyanka Chaturvedi has said because she's remained politically agnostic. I'm really heartened by the debate that which you have held there on all the panelists. We must point the tail of the donkey, which is political impunity, right? How political powers that be very often fail the women in our country, which is what Colin Gonsalves is saying as well.
Let me take that, Trisha, to Priyanka Chaturvedi. Priyanka Chaturvedi, the ADR report suggests about 158 out of our MPs, MLAs are allegedly involved in crimes against women. They spread across states. The fact, therefore, is that if our MPs themselves are people allegedly involved in crimes against women, what's the message that goes down the line? Surely somewhere there must be some kind of zero tolerance to those who are seen to be guilty, or if not guilty, alleged to be, even if they are accused of. If there is a prima facie case made out against them, they should be rooted out of public life. But they still continue in some form in public life.
I am totally in agreement, and I'm ashamed to know the numbers as far as they representing these people who have charges against them, have been given tickets, have been voted into the positions of power that they are in, and continue to represent their constituencies in the parliament.
But do they have a sense of
impunity
in saying it? Do they feel a sense of impunity that they can get away with it?
Yes, Rajdeep, allow me to complete.
Please go ahead.
What Trisha was saying, I quite agree with what Trisha and Talish both are saying. Rape in India has become an instrument of wielding power. Whether it is caste intersectionality, whether it is economics intersectionality, whether it is the intersectionality of them coming and representing them in the parliament, they come on the basis of the vote that the constituency is giving them. Let's also understand that there are two parts to it. One is a ticket is being given to them. Yes, absolutely, the political party should be held accountable. The second part being that they are winning and coming to the parliament. Please understand, the constituencies are voting for them despite knowing what are the charges against them, the heinous charges against them. So the point here is, when I keep talking about prevention and having more women in positions of power, which I think Trisha made, where Trisha said most of the levers of power are in the hands of the men. And that is where the problem lies. That is when the power reflex happens. Now, for example, the Bilkis Bano case. I'm talking about the Bilkis Bano case simply because it was in the media scrutiny. It was in the media limelight. And what happened to her? She fights her fight. She gets them convicted. And then after some years, with absolute impunity, those accused are let go. until unless there's another round of outrage which gets them behind the bars thanks to the Supreme Court of India. So the point is, when we're talking about mechanisms coming into place, institutions coming into place, let power politics not play where justice needs to be done. It should be the institutional mechanism that comes into play, which is absolutely off everyone's political spaces. I think that is only when we will be a more enlightened, empowered society.
So it's not about laws, it's not just about having tough laws.
To people who are in positions of power.
Yeah, it's not just about having tough laws, it's actually having lawmakers and institutions, more importantly, that will ensure through process, through policy, that those laws are followed up. Colin Gonsalves, the Supreme Court, for example, takes suo moto notice in this case of Kolkata. But there are so many cases across this country. Even in the Bilkis Bano, it required the Supreme Court to step in. The truth of the matter is that you could well argue that that hardly is going to resolve the issue. The Supreme Court or even the President of India may speak out may speak out after Kolkata, but there are dozens of other crimes being committed every day that don't result in either the Supreme Court or the President of India waking up.
Well, Rajdeep, I'll take a little issue with you. I don't think the Supreme Court has been effective in the least. And if you look at the Haryana wrestlers case, day 1 registered an FIR, day 2 case disposed of. And the wrestlers struggled, went from pillar to post, while the main culprit went roaming around the country, gloating about the fact that there's no action taken against him. In Nirbhaya's case, we did something right, but we did many things wrong. What we did right was the movement and the anger and the frustration and the coming out on the streets. But what we did wrong was to decide that, yes, we need a stronger law. So therefore, we need a committee. So therefore, a committee is formed. Justice Verma heads the committee. Brilliant judge. The first and fatal mistake that he made was to take the proceedings of that committee out of the streets where they were surrounded by people. They had reclaimed the streets, and he took them into a conference room. 1 year passes, report comes, brilliant report. Law is amended, brilliant amendments, and we are back to square one. What we need in India is the institutionalizing of non-violent direct action by men and women across the country, but led by women. So
No,
that these are not
you see,
1
but
month,
the problem,
2 months,
you see,
3
you can't
months.
sustain, it can't be 365 days, right? The institutional changes could have come after even the Nirbhaya fund, 30% of it is underutilized. The Mahila police is not in place. You see, the fact is that the recommendations may be fine. Who's going to implement them? Who's going to act on them? That's where state governments come in.
Yeah.
Law and order is a state subject. In this case, the Bengal government is responsible. In the case of Badlapur, the Maharashtra government is responsible. So the state governments also have to walk the talk, and they don't.